Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here today. I'm going to speak very slow in English, so you guys can understand that what actually I'm saying. First of all, I'm going to keep it really in the middle of the line of technicality, so everyone here can understand what I'm talking about. So today, since this is the first talk of the session, I'm going to be talking about bypassing two-factor authentication mechanisms in different kinds of web apps, mobile phones, as well as other stuff. So this is me. My name is Shahmeer Amir, and I work for a company called Velix, which is a cybersecurity consultancy company. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a penetration testing engineer, and I'm a cybersecurity researcher. By nature, I do bug bounty hunting a lot for a lot of different companies on a lot of different platforms: Facebook, Microsoft, Google, Yahoo, Twitter. I did my master's in security science recently, and I'm going to pursue my PhD very soon. So yeah, that's about me. Agenda. What are we going to talk about? First of all, we're going to talk about what two-factor authentication really is. Then we're going to talk about conventional implementations of 2FA in web applications. We're going to move to bypassing those implementations via different methods. Then we're going to see how multi-factor authentication is initiated in different mobile phones. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Face ID. So as you can see, I have a very good agenda here today for you guys to actually see. 2FA, yeah, initially. First, we have to understand what it really is, because most of us don't have the exact idea what 2FA really is. It's not just sending code to your mobile phone. It's not just sending code to your hardware token device. It's actually much more than that. Is it secure? Of course not. 2FA by nature is not a secure design platform, because most organizations consider it secure, but it's actually not. We'll see how it's not secure in a few minutes. Yeah, so there are several implementations. First, on mobile phones, we get SMS on our cell phones to authenticate into web applications, and then we have third-party softwares like Authy, Google Authenticator, and stuff like that. So we're going to be talking about how to bypass these different kinds of implementation flaws in different 2FA mechanisms. 2FA workflow. So I have a little video here that I want to show you guys.
Passwords are everywhere. We use them to access our money, our communications, even our social lives. At first, we used one password for everything, but that wasn't good enough, so we started making our passwords even more complicated and began using password managers to organize the dozens or hundreds of the unique passwords we used. But no matter how complex our password system was, it was never enough to prevent account takeover, because all it took was one phishing email or database exploit, and your password was out in the world. So, if passwords are impossible to protect on their own, what do we do? That's where two-factor authentication comes in. Two-factor authentication, or 2FA, adds a second method of identity verification to secure your accounts. First, the thing you know, your password. Then, something unique that you have, like your phone or fingerprint. By combining your password with one of these factors, attackers can't access your account even if they have your password. The most common 2FA systems use a unique one-time code with every login attempt. This code is tied to your account and generated by a token, smartphone, or sent to you by text message. The more modern and most secure form of 2FA uses a mobile app to send an approval notification to your smartphone or smartwatch for the least hassle possible. With 95% of breaches involving account takeover, two-factor authentication is the most effective method of prevention. It's time for everybody, businesses, governments, and you, to take the easy and effective step of enabling two-factor authentication on all accounts. If it uses a password, it needs to use two-factor authentication.
Yeah, so that was a little video about two-factor authentication. I know that you guys understood. Most of you already had an idea what it really is. Now let's get to the technical part of the stuff. What kind of tokens are in 2FA? We have three main kinds of tokens. One is event-based, the other is time-based, and then we have challenge-based tokens. Event-based token, an event-based token is a token that is generated on a specific time, based on a certain event that happens, otherwise it's not generated. For example, take Facebook, its connection with Authy. You connect with that, and that's an event that triggers the Authy's backend mechanism, which generates an event-based token. Then we have a time-based token. You can take the example of RSA, hardware token device, which generates a time-based token every second or every minute, which you can use to log into the systems. It's specifically triggered on a certain timeline. Then we have a challenge-based token. Basically, an OTP system generates a challenge-based token on demand using random challenge keys that is provided by the authentication server. So this is the more complex form of tokens, and it can be used to sign people in based on certain challenges. We can take the example of different single sign-on mechanisms in thin clients and thick clients via this. So yeah, let's get to the good stuff now, since we have took over a lot of time in understanding what 2FA is. We're going to look at 5 different mechanisms today in bypassing 2FA in mobile apps, web apps. Initially, we're going to look at, these are some of my findings that I did in different platforms, and I'm going to be sharing them with you. And of course, other researchers. First of all, we're going to look at how I bypassed 2FA in Mapbox, which is a map analytics website. Then we're going to look at how I bypass multi-factor authentication mechanism in one of the e-wallets in Pakistan. And then we're going to look at, there's another researcher who bypassed PayPal's 2FA system via secret questions. Then we're going to look at that. Then we're going to look at how 2FA can be bypassed via zero auth. And then we're going to look at how we can bypass 2FA via exploiting voicemail services. Yeah, so Mapbox 2FA bypass. How did I do it? It was the basic flaw in this entire mechanism was that the application allowed users to log in just after changing their passwords without a primary authentication mechanism. So that could be used to bypass 2FA. Let's take a look at how did a normal process flow would have worked. I'm a user. I request a password change in a web app. I get the password change token in my email address. I change the password, and by my convenience, it automatically logs me into the web app without any authentication. Now, if I have 2FA enabled on my account, and since this process is not following the particular standards or policies while taking a look at login or session management, an attacker would come in, of course, assuming that he has the victim's credentials. Attacker would come in, he would be faced with a 2FA page, and then he would request a password reset token to his email address, and just after that, he can bypass the 2FA mechanism easily by just changing the password that will log me into the account. So yeah, and this is one of the bounty shots that I got, these are certain kinds of business logic flaws that have high values in the market, so companies pay a lot. So this is, what I was paid about $1,000 for this flaw. So this is the first one. Now e-wallet bypass. Now this is interesting actually. This e-wallet had 3 forms of authentication mechanisms. So I utilized response manipulation techniques to actually bypass the 2FA in this e-wallet. Here's a complete video of it. I'm going to show you right now. So as you can see what the Android AES encryption key was actually hard coded into the Android app. So what I did was I took that away, and since it was hard-coded, I could easily encrypt or decrypt the communication that was going on. So initially, the application would ask for your national identity number and a mobile phone number, which of course you would know in order to bypass the 2FA system. Now, it was very easy to bypass that. I simply took burp suit and activated the Android app, then I was logged in successfully. But after interception we got the Android AES encryption key from the Android app that was hard-coded in it. After we found out that a complete a valid response generated this structure, as you can see that I've highlighted here. And we encrypted that using the AES encryption key, and even if we entered the wrong OTP that was being sent to the server, we could easily intercept that and replace the response codes with the valid ones, and we would be logged in. As you can see, I'm intercepting the response right here, and I could change the response code with the valid ones, and I would be logged into the application. Successful. Now, they had another authentication mechanism, which was the PIN. The PIN was actually the password, but it was a 4-character password that was sent to that the user knew. Initially, what we did was we also intercepted a valid response of that PIN, and saved it for us. And we just had to change the user ID within the valid response after decrypting the AES key and then encrypting it again. And we could easily bypass the second form of authentication there as well. As you can see that the PIN, we don't know the PIN, so it's telling us that it's unsuccessful. Now, using burp suit, we intercept the response, and we intercept the response, and moving forward, after intercepting the response, we could replace the response with a valid response code, and using that valid response code, we bypassed the 2FA in this e-wallet. Now, there was also a third form of authentication here that we bypassed. That was the initial login PIN. We bypassed that as well, and using the same response manipulation mechanism that we utilized in the past, we bypassed 2FA in this as well. So this is how basically we bypassed 2FA in this e-wallet system that we had. Abusive scenario. Now, how could an attacker abuse this? So basically, attacker logs in. He doesn't know anything. He just knows your national identity card number and your phone number. He logs in. Initially, he makes an account himself after logging in, and intercepts all the valid response codes, so he can decrypt those response codes and replace that with your user ID, which we can automatically get by intercepting the response codes of the initial login mechanism. And then we can replace those with every forthcoming login portals. Yeah, so now we're going to talk about, I'm going to show you how one of the researchers bypassed 2FA in one of the PayPal websites. Here he utilized request manipulation technologies. So this was the process flow. If you go to a PayPal website, they will ask you to enter your 2FA code, or you could actually try another way, which was the secret question and answers. So here, if the attacker did not know the secret answers to the questions, he would be denied of the access of the internal application. But if the attacker himself removed the challenge and response fields from the request, then the servers and the backend API would completely ignore that and allow login. So attacker logs in, he selects the alternative option, attacker enters the incorrect answers, he intercepts the request from burp, and removes the parameters, challenge and response. And by removing the parameters, the attacker is granted access to the internal application. Yeah, Relate IQ. This was a website that I bypassed 2FA in as well, and this was actually using zero auth implementations. according to my survey, 95% of web applications do not implement zero-auth techniques on zero-auth, 2FA techniques on zero-auths. So I have a video of how I bypassed it here as well, which I'm going to show you. So as you can see, when you log in using your user email address and password, it asks you for your 2FA code, which you don't have. So if you have access to the victim's zero-auth implementation account, you can just click on that particular zero-auth mechanism and it would allow you internal access to the systems. Like here, it was just in a jiffy. According to my survey, 95% of web applications have this vulnerability. They do not implement 2FA standards on zero-auth mechanisms. Yeah, so the abusive scenario here would be that the attacker compromises the user's Facebook account. He clicks on login via Facebook, and the attacker is easily granted access to the victim's account. Yeah, so this is a very interesting one, bypassing 2FA mechanisms while exploiting voicemails. So let's just get on to it. Yeah, so the process flow is simple. User logs into an application. He requests 2FA code via call. If at the same time the user is on another call with anyone else, the 2FA code gets delivered to their voicemail address. Pretty simple. But how would an attacker exploit this? An attacker would initially, log into the victim account, engage himself on a call with the victim, and moving forward, the attacker would simply, get the 2FA code on the victim's voicemail, and as the victim is engaged on another call, he could extract the 2FA code from the voicemail. So how do we exploit the voicemail? Initially, this is actually for Australian service providers. You need to obtain the NANI caller ID spoofing service. I normally use SpoofCard for it. Of course, then we have the Australian number, Australian region input number, the destination number you got to put, which is written. I'm going to tell you why I'm putting this destination number in a bit. And then you have to enter the caller ID that you need to be displayed on the victim's mobile number. And if you're using spoof card, a number and access code is displayed, you call this number, you input the access code, and you will be granted access after you point hash. Now, explanation of how, why we use the voicemail number. Basically, all resellers use the exact same main services as Optus does. Optus is one of the Australian telecom providers. Primary number to call for voicemail is 321. So when spoofing, we need a remote number to call as we're unable to reach 321. Australian cellular providers provide a remote number to call. In case for customer overseas, this number is this. So the voicemail actually gets delivered to this number, and you can call it, press hash, and access the voicemail easily. And since you're spoofing the victim's own number, and you're calling from the victim's number, you can, harvest the codes from there. So it's actually exploiting the voicemail itself. Yeah, now we're going to look at how to bypass 2FAs in mobile phones. We're going to look at, how to bypass 2FA in the pattern lock in different Samsung phones using ADB. So this option will only work if you have USB debugging enabled on your device and your PC is allowed to connect via ADB. If you meet such requirements, then any pattern lock in the world can be bypassed using this technique. It's fairly simple. You connect your cell phone to a laptop or a device, and moving forward, you simply write this command. It will remove the gesture key function from your phone, thus when you restart it, you have to set a new pin. And if you set a new pin, that is your desired pin, and then you can bypass the pattern lock very easily. So using this particular technique, ADB shell RM, you're removing the entire gesture key function from the phone, which you can later gain access to. Okay, yeah, so iris scanner in S8, Samsung iris scanner in S8. This is a very interesting one. Samsung Iris S8 scanner, according to my analysis and research, is not a very secure retina scanner. Here are the things you need. You need a lens specifications with about 200 millimeters. You need to be at a distance of 15 meters. I'm sorry, I wrote millimeters there. 15 meters from the target. You need to print that photo in a high quality copy, and then you're going to need a wet lens if you want to unlock it. And with sufficient amount of time and access to the phone, you can actually unlock it. So let's see how this works. I'm going to show you a little video on how this works. So as you can see, these are two guys sitting next to each other. This guy takes a photo of that guy using his high quality camera phone, high quality camera, and which is in night mode, so you get better lighting from the better lighting. Yeah. So now you need to print that photo in high quality while zooming in on the eye. And the infrared image that is printed on the Samsung paper, it actually prints that eye out. And it's really easy if you just, cut that thing out and put a wet lens on it. And after putting the wet lens on it, you can fairly easily bypass the iris scanner. I'm going to show you how it's done real quick. So as you can see, the iris scanner is activated and the phone won't be unlocked without iris recognition. Now we have the photo of the eye next to us, and we have a wet lens that is also here. So we place the wet lens on the photo of the eye, and we show that photo to the S8 scanner, and here you go, it's bypassed. So that's how easy it is. And similarly, same thing goes for all facial recognition systems in Samsung. I'm going to talk about Face ID just now, so and this is going to be the last part of my talk. So hopefully, if you have any questions after that, I'll be happy to answer them. Face ID. Apple explained a lot of good stuff about Face ID on their iPhone X launch, but the hardwares are awesome. We have a dot projector, we have an IR camera, we have a 3D model of the face and everything. But what if the vulnerability is not in the external hardware? What if the vulnerability is in the internal hardware? How can it be hacked? Well, my analysis and the analysis of a lot of other researchers that I work with on the internet show that Apple saves its facial and iris scanning images in something called Secure Enclave Processor, or SEP. So, what is it? It's basically it's a system that is within the iPhone that actually has its own power source, its own dedicated I/O lines, its own operating system, its own peripherals. It's a standalone device within another device, actually. This is how it is. This is its basic core infrastructure. This is the SEP-KF core. That's the boot ROM. We have the crypto core. And this is basically the hierarchical structure of how the SEP works. So yeah, the future of Face ID is basically based on SEP. But SEP also has several flaws. SEP operating system lacks basic exploit protections. There's no memory layout randomization. The power manager and the PLL are open to attacks. We have inclusion of few sources, pins, that should be reevaluated over time, and then the demolition functionality after, rather, which is dangerous. So according to my initial analysis, when we get our hands on the iPhone X, which has Face ID, I'm sure that it's not gonna take a long time to bypass it, because attackers look for different kinds of flaws, whether it's in the external hardware or internal one. So the future of Face ID is not secure as Apple says it is. Yeah, so that's about it for my presentation, guys. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.